hard to get to this one fast. I actually finished it in a matter of days, so that was exciting for me because it's been a really long time since I found a book that made me want to listen when I could be doing something else. It's also, which let me start with the fact that this is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This is her newest installment in the Hunger Games series. One, it made me realize I need to go back and reread the books, particularly Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. But two, this is exactly what I needed as a redemption story for A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I saw someone on TikTok, because honestly, so before I finished it, and we know, the channel is called Spoiled, because I like spoilers. I think I liked one video about talking about the book, and I could not get away from that content for days. One of the last things I saw was somebody commented about why she thought that we needed yet another book that reminds us of the pain and suffering and putting even more people in danger and all that kind of stuff. And I was just like, if that is the mark of a good author, if there's a demand for more. Personally, when I heard that she was going to do a book from Haymitch's perspective, I was really excited because you get this alternate perspective of things that gives you insight into what you do know, but it also puts a twist on things and gives you new insight into something maybe you hadn't thought about. I was really excited because I always thought when they did a quick overview of past games, I was always intrigued as to like what happened in these games. I want to know more about these games. And I will say, Sunrise on the Reaping, it made me angry. It made me cringe. It made me feel emotions that the others hadn't in terms of the injustice. I feel like Collins did a really great job with Snow this go round because we knew Snow was bad, but he was a lot more subversive in the original trilogy. Like, you knew that he was an evil person, but you could also see that he could have a valid excuse for everything. Here, he was much more vindictive. He was a lot more overt with what he was doing, and that ticked me off because this whole thing is his thirst for power, his greed. A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, it was all about the fact that his family was poor and he was jealous of the people who weren't poor, and he wanted to rise to the top, and anybody who got in his way, anybody he was jealous of, needed to go. So I loved the emotion she pulled out of me in this book. However, and this is not a bad thing, it's just it didn't go the way that I expected. And I can't say what I was hoping for or what I'd anticipated would be better, or if the way she did it was better. I feel like the way she wrote this story, it served a different purpose. It was less story and more politically driven. You just get to see the inner workings of people's minds, of the ruling sect, and the way that they dictate everybody around them. Whereas the story that I was hoping for was a lot purer to the glimpse that we'd gotten, and it was just more of a story in that everything just kind of happened because that's the way it happened, not because it was orchestrated. We knew from the Hunger Games that Haymitch won because he used his arena against his opponent. Please forgive me if I'm incorrect about this, but you could almost say it was unintentional. In this book, it was very clear from the start that there was a plot to overthrow the government and take down the Hunger Games, which is great. I liked the purity of what we were initially given. And I did have an idea as to how this was going to pan out because I did see somebody talk about, and I thought this was smart because they talk about how at the very end, which if you've read The Hunger Games, this is not a spoiler for you. Apparently people are getting mad because people are revealing he won the Hunger Games. But we all knew that anyways. So if you haven't seen or if you haven't read at least the original trilogy, maybe you should start there. We all knew how he won the Hunger Games. And at the end, when they do that recap of how everything went, he's like, wow, that is not a true depiction of what happened. It was heavily edited. It is a full circle moment, which a book should basically be a full circle. Like, you should have your bookends. You should mirror the front and the end. So the beginning, the way he got into the Hunger Games was not depicted correctly, and then in the end, how he won the Hunger Games and how he got basically to the end of the Hunger Games wasn't an accurate depiction. And so this person was just talking about the fact that it's just a really good depiction of how things are not what they seem, but I wanted what they seemed. But yeah, it was still a really good book. I would say that my biggest qualm was his romance with Lenore Dove. It could have been the narration. The narrator got much better towards the end, and the narrator was actually really good voicing the other characters. But because Haymitch is something of a dry character, particularly the way that Woody Harrelson plays him in the movies, that was what the narrator was drawing from, his inspiration for voicing. So anyways, so I feel like it was more about the narration and not necessarily the writing. We will see in a matter of months or years or however long it takes for me to reread this book. But I felt like his romance with Lenore was a bit forced. There was this really heavy emphasis, and I think it was more about the language that was used. Oh, my love, Lenore. Oh, my dove. Like, it was a little much. And it took out that, and not that anybody in District 12 could necessarily be innocent, but that innocent romance, that first blush of love. So I would have liked a little bit more etherealness, kind of like a glow about their relationship versus harsh realities. His romance with Lenore, it felt like, well, he had to be in love with Lenore because this is what drove everything, all his actions, rather than he's in love with Lenore. And because he's in love with Lenore, these are the steps he's taking. Not my favorite part. Understood the reason for it, but I wish it had been portrayed or perhaps narrated differently so that it did feel a little bit more ethereal and romantic. But enough of that. I spent probably 3 to 4 days going back through the book so that I could write my notes. And I have a double-sided 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5 pages of notes. This one was only a 13-hour read. I believe it was at least it felt much shorter than A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but again, I thought A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes had a lot of plot holes, a lot of writing issues. It didn't captivate you and drive you forward, so that also could have made it feel longer. So here we go. Our main character, Haymitch Abernathy. When we open, it is the day of the reaping. It is also his 16th birthday, which I thought that was really nice symbolism. To start with, he's having a convo with Lenore, and he's like, I'm never going to have a birthday without the reaping. And her thought is, why are you looking at it like that? Because eventually, hopefully, you will. But for him, the reaping is synonymous with his birthday, and so he can't enjoy his birthday. But as I was saying, Lenore Dove is his girlfriend. She is a member of the Covey, so this is hearkening back to A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, in which Lucy Gray, the first and only District 12 winner before Haymitch, she was a member of the Covey. She had this romance with Snow. We're not going to get into that. Watch my other video if you want to see more on that. We have Haymitch's mother. His father has died. And then we also have his 10-year-old brother, Sid. Here's a little bit of a spoiler. For this 50th Hunger Games, this second quarter quell, the twist is that instead of having 24 tributes, 2 from each district, they're going to have 48. So there's going to be 4 from each district. The other tributes that were reaped were Wyatt Callow, who's a bookie. He and his family make money off of betting on the Hunger Games. Luella McCoy, who is a neighbor of Haymitch's. He has grown up with her. She's like a little sister of sorts. Maisie Donner, who she is the connection that we get to the Mockingjay pin, and she has a twin sister named Mary Lee. And then there's Woodbine Chance. Fast forward, we wake up on Haymitch's birthday. His mom's like, hey, the cistern is low. Can you please refill it? Which is where they get their water source. He's like, yeah, sure. You know, give me a minute. He helps Hattie make white liquor. She says, happy birthday. Here's some stuff that you can sell on the black market. Go enjoy the rest of your day. He's like, well, I could either go home and refill the cistern, or I can meet Lenore Dove. Another little side road here. Lenore is cousins with Burdock Everdeen. If you recognize his name, it's because he is Katniss's dad. We have this whole thing where Haymitch is best friends with Burdock. This is how he meets Lenore when they are much younger. Those two start dating. It's really nice to see all these little full circle moments, like the way that everybody's interconnected. It just gives a little bit more meaning to stuff. He goes to meet with Lenore. She ends up giving him a flint striker for his birthday. And it has the head of a snake as well as the beak of a long-necked bird kind of intertwined. We go from the meadow to the reaping. Their escort is a woman named Drusilla Sickle. Not a very nice lady. Like, nobody cares about District 12, and it is not a badge of honor to be the escort for District 12, but she seems to be made of some other kind of nasty stuff. She draws their names, and then she draws Woodbine Chance. Now, Woodbine is part of this family who, they don't stand for stuff necessarily. So it's of no surprise when he runs the other direction, he is then killed. A peacekeeper shoots him in the head. His head explodes. Mass chaos. And of course, Drusilla is like, why did you have to do that here? Couldn't you have waited till he'd gone around the bend? They're trying to clean up the mess. His mother is trying to get to the body. She wants to have her son. The peacekeepers are like, absolutely not. And the peacekeepers seem especially heinous in this novel. As she's attempting to get to her son, Lenore Dove steps in, and Lenore is trying to help her. And Lenore is something of a civil rights advocate. She's already been arrested twice for various infractions. But in this case, she's really just trying to help a woman get to her newly deceased son. Haymitch sees a peacekeeper about to strike her, so he intervenes. He gets in the middle and he's basically like, hey, don't do that. Well, they take this as kind of an act of violence, and so they illegally reap him into the Hunger Games. They're like, here's his name on this piece of paper. Drusilla is very intentional in making sure that is the one that she pulls out of the pile. So now he is in the games. They are taken to the train. They're not really given any time with their family. However, his family, so Plutarch, who we've seen Plutarch throughout this series, he is their promo guy. So he's the dude out there with the cameramen getting all of the propos and whatever, talking to Haymitch's mom and brother. If you do this for me, if you pose for me, if you act out these things for me, I'll give you guys some time together. Well, yeah, he takes definite advantage of that, and Haymitch is appalled at the way that he is using his family. Earlier, and this is an important little detail, he had a bag of gumballs that he was going to give to Lenore, so he gives that as well as his new pocket knife to Sid, and he says, hey Sid, give these to Lenore when you have a chance. So now he's on the train. And one thing another thing, I liked a lot of things. Another thing I liked about this book was you saw the evolution of the Hunger Games. I feel like when we get to Katniss, it's very advanced. It is a well-oiled machine. Here, it's still kind of in the Dark Ages. I mean, it was in the Dark Ages in A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So I was surprised at how rudimentary everything seemed to be. So with Katniss, even though she's from District 12 and nobody cares about District 12, they're still giving the royal treatment. Here, they're chattel. No matter what district they're from, overall, they are not treated well. They don't get good accommodations. The train is very basic. It's not comfortable. Plutarch doesn't read the room very well, and he's trying to celebrate Haymitch's birthday with a cake and singing, and Haymitch is like, we're not doing this. Maisley, who is like the town mean girl because she and Marilee are wealthy girls for the area. They are town girls, kind of like Katniss's mother. She is very acerbic. She goes after Drusilla and how old Drusilla looks and how tacky people from the capital are. Drusilla beats the crap out of her. And Plutarch is like, careful, this girl's got to be on camera. And she says like, I really don't care because I don't like this girl. Around all of this time, the kids are left alone, and Haymitch and Luella decide to ally. Luella does not want to ally with Wyatt because she doesn't trust him because he's a bookie. And then Haymitch just doesn't really care for Maisley. I don't think he's really sold on the idea of an alliance anyways, but he feels like he needs to look out for Luella. And this is where we get the term of endearment sweetheart, because he's always calling Katniss sweetheart. And so this is the genesis of it, because he's like, Lenore might be the love of my life, but this girl is my one and only sweetheart. Do I think that makes sense? Not really. It's a little creepy in my opinion, but I see where Collins is trying to go, so I accept it. They get to the Capitol and they're herded into this old gymnasium where they're basically deliced. They're like sprayed with disinfectants. District 12, because Lucy Gray is their one and only victor, but this is 40 years later. And at the end of A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Snow has chased her off into the woods. He has tried to kill her, and she's never seen nor heard from again. But nobody knows who she is. She's basically an unnamed victor. She's an unknown. All they know is they had one a really long time ago, but she's not been around in 40 years. So they don't have any mentors. And this is something, again, I loved. I love the way that Collins brought in the people we know to connect us to this story. She brings in Mags and Wiress as their mentors. Haymitch, not super psyched about this because he doesn't trust Wiress, who had won the year before. Not that he doesn't trust her. He just doesn't see the validity of her win and the value in her as a mentor, because in her games it was all about reflective surfaces, and the game makers did their job far too well because everybody was discombobulated. They could not make out who was who. They couldn't get their way or find their way around, except for Wiress, who during the training sessions picked up on clues as to what her arena was gonna be. And so she used the game maker's arena against them, and she was able to clearly make her way, I think, onto the cornucopia or something. And she just sat there while everybody else killed each other. And even the game makers, when people would sponsor her and send her parachutes, like, they couldn't even get these parachutes to her because they didn't even understand their own arena. So Haymitch is like, what did she do? What is her value? What is her worth? How is she going to be helpful for me? She didn't even fight anybody. The kid who was her final opponent essentially killed himself because he thought he was throwing his axe or his sword or whatever at her, but really it was just a reflection. And so it just rebounded upon himself, and then he falls into the water and he drowns. Again, I thought it was so cool because in Catching Fire, Wirus is Looney Tunes, and we will find out later why. But Mags, we don't get a whole lot from Mags. He doesn't even really know who she is, except that he does remember her in recent games having a victor from her district and her comforting him as he loses his ever-loving mind. But he does think it's ironic that he has two careers as his mentor. Their prep team are two young people, a girl named Proserpina and a boy named Vitus, or Vitus, I think it's probably Vitus. They're university students, they're basically doing this as credit, and we hear a lot about Proserpina's sister, because apparently she is all that in a bag of chips, and she's really made a name for herself in social circles. Their stylist is a guy named Magno Stift, who is largely MIA. Turns out he's married to Drusilla. They've been married for 30 years, but they hate each other's guts. But he is on probation as a stylist because we already know this. Nobody puts effort into District 12. The year before, when he sent them out for their interviews, he just sent them out in their training clothes, and the Capitol's like, no. So he is on thin ice with things. Word on the street is that he is sick because he has been licking toads. Yeah, I guess the thing is, the rumor is, and he has this thing for reptiles anyways, but even though a toad's not a reptile, it's an amphibian. But apparently licking toads is like a hallucinogenic. You can get it right, you can get it wrong. It may not actually work, and it could all just be a myth, but yeah, he's been licking toads, literally licking toads, and he is sick. So we don't see much of him, and when we do see him again, like when he does show up for their interviews, he shows up late, and he brings reptiles with him, like snakes, like that's all they're supposed to wear. Anyways, after getting prepped, which there's not a lot that goes into it, there's nothing for them to wear, they are headed into the opening ceremony. So they're going to get in their chariots and they're going to roll around, and this is just another idea as to how early-ish in the stages of the Hunger Games it is, because the crowd, I don't know, I get something that I'd forgotten is that they weren't always forced to watch the Hunger Games, so there wasn't a lot of participation necessarily, and I think at this point it's mandatory to watch the games and people are really getting more into it. But the crowd is basically drunk and unruly. They get piled into a carriage meant for two but has to hold four. They're on their way when somebody shoots a firecracker into the arena, for lack of a better word. It spooks their horse. Their horse goes haywire and starts bolting around. They have an encounter, I believe, with District 11's chariot, and that chariot damages the wheels on theirs. So they are ejected from the chariot, and here's our first real spoiler. Luella dies. And I'm just like, what? Which then something happens later that I was like, what? So yeah, she dies. And Haymitch is like, I'm not gonna let the peacekeepers take her. So he hijacks a chariot, and this whole time, while like they're lying on the ground and all this chaos is happening, there are two District 1 tributes that are given a lot of face time. Silka and Panache. Panache is like, I'm gonna be the first person to reach Snow's mansion in a chariot. This horse better go. So he and Silka are trying to get these horses to move. No doing. Haymitch hijacks someone's chariot, and he bolts for the mansion, and then as a statement, he lays Luella on the porch of this mansion, and he's defiant of Snow. He's trying to let people know, look, this is what the Capitol does. This is who Snow is. They're chained up, put back in their vans. They're taken back to the training center. This is where he meets Ampert, who I adored Ampert. I didn't see where things were going to go at first, and at first I was like, oh great. But Ampert, bringing things back around, is Beety's son. So, catching fire, Beety and Wiress were main players in subverting the Capitol. So, Beety has been trying to undermine the Capitol and the Hunger Games. He had tampered with the communication system, and he had gotten caught. He did not know he had gotten caught until the Reaping. He was too valuable to kill. So again, they pressed his son. They illegally reaped Ampert, who is I think 12 or 13, into the Hunger Games as punishment for Beety, because he's going to have to watch his own son die. Not only is he going to have to watch his own son die, but he is his son's mentor. All the mind games that are happening. We meet Ampert. Now that Luella is gone, Haymitch has no interest in aligning with anybody. And then when Ampert approaches him, he's like, oh great, this kid. He's probably a reject from his own district because he's the weakling, so he's going to come try and ally with whoever he can. No, Ampert is in cahoots with his dad, and he is trying to align as many districts as possible. Haymitch is like, thank you, but no thank you. They go back to where they're staying, which is like a really dumpy apartment complex. Oof. Mags comforts Haymitch, and then she and Wiress looks at them and says, what do you want? I never asked my tributes in the past what they wanted, because essentially what they all wanted was to survive the Hunger Games. But then I remembered what I wanted and how that drove me and how that helped me succeed. So I want to know, what do you want? Maisley says that she doesn't want to beg or plead for her life. When she goes, she wants to go on her own terms. Wyatt says he just wants to go fast. And then Haymitch agrees with them, but more so than that, and there are cameras. Snow is listening and watching to everything that they say and do. So he's like, how can I say this without actually saying this? Which, after he says it, I think Wiress paraphrases it anyways, which is overthrow the Capitol. He says that he wants people to remember why he's there. That this is a punishment to the districts because of that war and the way that the Capitol won. Now they're back at training, and Panache attacks Haymitch. I don't really understand why. I reread it a couple times to see if I missed something, and there's no explicit explanation. However, it's probably just because he's a hothead. He lost his temper. He either doesn't like Haymitch, and so he takes this out on him, or he's upset / jealous that Haymitch did what he wanted to, which was be the first to arrive at the mansion in a chariot. Whatever the reason, he comes for Haymitch. They are quickly broken up. Haymitch has also told them about Ampert's proposal, at which point they were like, well, Haymitch doesn't want to ally with us either. So around that point, he was like, well, maybe I should. He's trying to protect his image. They are very interested in aligning with Ampert. Meanwhile, Haymitch officially encounters Beety, who has a booth there, and his booth is about using potatoes as batteries. And this is where he explains everything to Haymitch, and he's like, yeah, so not only am I a mentor, but I have to sit here and watch my kid prepare to die. They have a conversation about how to break the arena, because Beety is like, this is the plan, we want you in on it. Haymitch is like, ooh, I don't know. After their convo, Haymitch does decide, let me align with 12, and then let's also align with all these other districts. Then they're like, what are we going to name ourselves? The careers have their name. Who are we? So they name themselves the Newcomers. From here, Plutarch intercepts them, and he says, actually, I need to take Haymitch with me. So he takes Haymitch to his ancestral home. Snow appears, and Snow is in bad condition. He is not looking or feeling well. Turns out he had food poisoning because he ate the same oysters that killed the parade master. In layman's terms, he poisoned the parade master, which is what we saw at the very beginning in Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, or even more in the beginning if you read the original trilogy first, where we learned that Snow got into power because he killed off the competition, and he did so by ingesting the same poisons he would feed them. He's coming back from a rough night of food poisoning. While Plutarch is out getting him some milk, he reveals two things to Haymitch. One is that he sees the flint striker that Lenore Dove had given Haymitch, and he's like, oh, can I take a look at that? He correctly assesses that it came from his sweetheart, largely because there was an engraving on the back. But he correctly guesses not only who Lenore Dove is, but what she is, that she's a covey. And he describes her as a covey to the T, which now has Haymitch second guessing himself and Lenore and her feelings for him. From there, he says, well, I have a surprise for you. Over in that door over there, someone's going to appear. Luella. Well, it's not actually Luella. It is, from what they can gather, she's from District 11. She was probably the daughter of rebels. Her family is probably gone. And then they took her, and now they are passing her off as Luella. Of course, District 12 is like, that's not Luella, so they nickname her Lulu. I mean, I guess to differentiate, I'll accept it. But she has been programmed, and she has probably some kind of comm system in her ear so they can tell her what to do. They can hear everything that people are saying around her. And then they also have her hooked up to some kind of a pump. What exactly this pump does, not clear. Haymitch gets one later that pumps anesthetic into him. She's not right in the head, but he says, here's your Luella. You're welcome. District 12 is like, we gotta be real careful in her presence. That night, there's a power outage. Haymitch wakes up and finds Beetee coming into his room. And Beetee's like, I don't have much time, but we need to talk about you joining the rebels. What he tells Haymitch is that the plan is to attack the brain. That every arena has a massive water tank underneath to sustain all the things that they would need water for. What he's gonna have to do is he's gonna have to go down, blow up that water tank, and drown the arena. And then he tells him that the best way to get there would be through a mud portal. The next day, when they're back at the training center, Panache decides to invite Haymitch into their alliance, and he says, thank you, but no thank you. At the end of the day, there are 8 districts with newcomers, 4 with careers. This is also the day that they have to have their private showing with the game makers. The game makers will judge them and give them a number on whatever factors are presented to them as to kind of how strong they'll be in the games. The District 12 has already been talking about how can we present ourselves, and for Haymitch, he wants to present himself as the rascal, like he's kind of out for himself, but he is with his alliance. When he goes with the game makers, he basically lays it out on the table, and he's like, you guys are corrupt, the Hunger Games are corrupt, when are you going to see the forest through the trees? They give him a 1. Nobody gets a 1. Even the weakest don't get a 1. But while it should be bad, it actually works in his favor because he has displayed on many occasions his health, his strength, his craftiness, his capabilities. So now on top of that, the mystery of why he got a 1, he's getting a lot of attention. It is about time for me to end it here. Stay tuned and we will have part 2 tomorrow.